Greetings and salutations, my friends. My name is Travis, aka Dad, and welcome to Dad Does Tech. I'm just an ordinary dad who loves tech and camera stuff, and today we are talking about gimbals. Now, whether you're shooting commercial work, stuff for YouTube, weddings, whatever it is, if you're shooting video, one of the most important things is to be able to get stable shots, and one of the best tools for doing that is a gimbal. And today we are looking at the Moza Aircross 2, not to be confused by its slightly older and bigger brother, the Moza Air 2, which looked very similar but had a slightly larger payload of 9.5 pounds versus the Aircross 2 having a payload of 7 pounds. The Moza Aircross 2 retails for a price of $399, which puts it at exactly $100 less than its older brother, the Moza Air 2, at $499. One of the biggest differences between the Moza Aircross 2 and the Moza Air 2, besides its payload capacity, is its build quality. It definitely doesn't feel as premium as some of those more expensive models. There is one big benefit of this more plasticky build on this gimbal, and that is that it's made of a lot more lightweight materials, which is going to make it a lot lighter when you're filming, and your back is gonna thank you later. As you can see right now, I have my Canon EOS R set up with my nifty 50 f1.8 lens, and this is a really light, compact setup, and this is easy for this gimbal. However, this isn't my main setup. Usually I'm using the lens I'm filming on right now, which is my 15-35 RF lens, and that is a much bigger lens, but this gimbal handles it no problem. The one thing that you do need to think about if you're somebody who uses a bigger camera, or you have a cage, or if you have a battery grip on your camera, is those type of accessories may make your camera too tall for this gimbal, so that when you tilt your camera up this way, it won't balance because it's too tall, because this arm right here isn't quite long enough to give it the depth it needs if your camera gets too tall. So it's not gonna be a matter of how much your camera weighs and what the payload is. It can handle it probably from a payload stance, but if your camera gets too tall, there's a pretty good chance that it won't balance when it's pointed up. One of the big improvements that a lot of gimbal manufacturers have been making to gimbals lately is the ability to lock all of the axes on your gimbal so that they're not flopping around all over the place, and it makes it a lot easier to balance. Now, my Weebill S up here, my Crane 2, and all the other gimbals I have currently use batteries. Now, the Moza Aircross 2 uses a battery pack that doubles as part of the handle of the gimbal itself. Now, one of the best new features from this battery pack design is that you no longer need a separate charger to charge the batteries for your gimbal. So if you need to charge them on the go, you can simply plug a USB Type-C cable right into this little port on the battery pack, or you can put the battery pack on the gimbal, and there's a slot on the gimbal where you can charge the battery pack straight through the gimbal while it's connected. That's pretty awesome. The battery pack on this gimbal is rated for 12 hours on a single charge, but you do have to factor in other things such as your camera setup, how heavy it is it balanced, and also what weather you're shooting in. Are you shooting indoors, or if you're shooting outside, if the weather conditions are cold, I've noticed that these batteries drain rather quickly, and you're probably not gonna see that full 12 hours in that situation, so keep that in mind. Your mileage may vary. It's time to talk about how you mount this camera to the gimbal, because you're gonna wanna know how to get it on and off of there. And depending on the kind of video you shoot, you may need to get it on and off rather quickly. And I shoot a lot of wedding videos, and so that means I go from shooting a gimbal shot where I'm tracking the bride and groom to maybe a stationary shot where I'm either handheld or going to a tripod, and I need to get to and from the situations rather quickly. That is where this Manfrotto adapter plate comes into play. This adapter plate that sits on the L bracket will take full-size Manfrotto plates, or you can use the one that comes with the actual Moza gimbal here. And all you have to do is rotate this knob on the side and then pinch these two buttons right here to slide your camera right off, and then you won't have to rebalance every single time you want to go handheld or to a tripod or back to your gimbal. It can all be done seamlessly with one plate and one knob. That's awesome. One of the observations I made about the Moza Aircross 2 when comparing it to some of my other gimbals, such as my Weebill S, which I use quite a bit, is that this arm that goes from the back motor up here is longer and a little bit more of a steeper incline on the Moza Aircross 2. And what that does is that allows the camera to rest higher and further away from this back motor, which means when you have a larger lens setup, the camera won't be as close to hitting this back motor. And the problem I was having is when I use the larger lens on this smaller gimbal is that when the camera has to move further back to balance it, is I would have to remove the eye cups because the eye cups on the Canon EOS R protrude kind of far out. So I'd have to remove them just so I could balance it and have it not hit the motor. And that was really, really annoying because the eye cups have screws in them and I was always going to be worried about losing those screws. And that's just not something I have to worry about now with the Moza Aircross 2. So great job. Now, while this arm is great because it extends out and it keeps my camera from hitting this back motor here, there is one slight issue, and that's that this motor does not clear this one. So this arm will hit this motor down here if you do a movement that tilts your camera this direction. And that can be kind of scary when that happens. I was out there on my first day and I took it out there and it hit that motor and it just sent my camera and lens into a frenzy. And when you see your precious camera and glass flopping around with no control, it is terrifying. While most gimbals have their power button located on the back of the gimbal where the screen is, where it's easy to see and press, this gimbal is a little bit different. You'd think it's this red button near the D-pad and dial, but in fact it's on the focus wheel here. And when you press it and turn it on, there's a neat little RGB ring that pops up and starts lighting up. Beyond just showing some pretty colors on your gimbal, this RGB light will change colors to represent what mode your gimbal is in. So if I were to switch this gimbal into Inception mode, all of a sudden the light turns blue. Now this is an interesting touch. It allows you to know what mode your gimbal is in when you want to look at the light. If you can remember what the colors represent, that's how you would know. But it also says it on the back of the screen, which is exactly what you'd be looking at when you're holding the gimbal. So for me, I don't really understand the value, I guess, of this RGB light because I would much prefer looking at the screen rather than tilting and looking what light it is and hoping that I remember what color represents what mode. On top of that, like I mentioned, I do film a lot of weddings, and the last thing I want is a big bright beacon drawing attention to myself during a wedding ceremony. I'd rather be as discreet as possible so people don't even know that I'm there. Thankfully, Moza was kind enough to offer us some settings that we can change in the menu system where we can dim down the brightness of the ring or even turn it off. Each axis on this gimbal can be set to 2 different modes: follow or locked. With the exception of the pan axis, the pan can be locked, follow, or in quick mode. So if you wanted to switch one of the axes from follow mode to locked, all you'd have to do is if you press up, now the tilt axis is locked. If you press to the left, now the roll axis is locked. If you press down, the pan axis is now locked. And now everything is locked and the gimbal will not move until I unlock one of the axes. If you tap to the right, that changes the pan axis into a quick mode, or more like a sports mode for quick movements. So if you're doing action shots or if you're shooting someone playing basketball or something like that, that's when you would use those quick pan modes on this gimbal. So it's important to remember, if you're somebody who wants a more traditional pan follow mode, you'll press up to lock the tilt axis, you press left to lock the roll axis, and now the gimbal will turn and move just like a more traditional pan follow mode. The gimbal does have a series of default modes that it can use for creative shots. Using the directional D-pad, you can get through them using these shortcuts. So if you want to do Inception mode, you can triple tap to the right on the D-pad and that will point the camera up. And from there, you'll have the ability to do a continuous roll or a 180 or a 360 or control it with the joystick. And you simply just press to the right to start it, and it'll start rolling around, and that'll get you that 360 barrel roll that we're starting to see more often in videos. However, there is one thing about this barrel roll feature in Inception mode that I wanted to mention, and that is that I've never been able to get it to work whenever I hold the gimbal horizontally. No matter what camera and what lens setup I'm using, even on a 2-pound lens setup, for whatever reason, whenever the gimbal has to fight gravity, it just fails. It starts to try and rotate and then it just fails. And even when I've gone into the settings and tried to stiffen the motors, I get the same results, and I don't know why. After a few failures, eventually it just puts itself to sleep. I've reached out to Moza on this issue, and hopefully I can find some resolution. If they do provide me some solution and tell me that there is a way to make this work, I will be sure to put that down in the comments down below, so be sure to check for that. To put the gimbal into underslung mode, you'll simply point the top of the gimbal towards the ground to where the gimbal is upside down and the handle is now pointed towards the sky. The camera will then stay horizontal just how you want it, but the handle will be pointed up so you can get those really low to the ground shots. To get your gimbal into FPV mode, where it's more like a first-person point of view, where the gimbal is gonna make your camera all flowy and kind of flying like an FPV drone, you would simply triple tap to the left on the gimbal, and now the gimbal goes into FPV mode. To get your gimbal into selfie mode, where you have the camera turn around and face towards you, you will triple tap on the trigger button, and then the gimbal will turn the camera right around, and then you can double tap to send it on back. The selfie mode is obviously mainly used for vlogging, but if you're using a big camera and a gimbal for vlogging, you must really hate your arms and back to want to do that to yourself. Seriously though, if you're going to use this thing to vlog, you're going to have to find a single arm workout, because this arm is going to be ripped, and then you're going to have a little chicken wing over here, and you're going to look really funny in t-shirts. If you find yourself in a situation where you need to get a shot where you're moving in a straight line, whether that's forward and backward or side to side, what you can do is you can line your camera up in the exact position you want it to be, and then you can lock all 3 of your axes, and that will allow you to get a nice steady shot moving in a straight line. For those shots when you're trying to do a tilt up to reveal something on the horizon, the best way to get that shot using this gimbal is to lock the roll axis but keep the tilt and the pan axis on follow. Something I noticed right away when I started filming with the Aircross 2 is that my hands, they just have this tendency to always hit all the buttons, lock axes, tilt the camera, and it would ruin all my shots. So it's really important, if you have bigger hands especially, to lock the controls so you don't bump them while you're trying to get your shot. So once you've got your settings ready, lock the controls by pressing and holding the up button on the D-pad, and that will put it in a locked controls mode, and then you just press it and hold it again to unlock it. Since we're already talking about settings, let's go ahead and talk about the menus and how you would navigate those on this gimbal. To get into the main menu system, you simply hold down this red button in the middle of the dial, and that will take you into the main menu tree. Using the directional pad up and down, you can go through the menus, and then if you click right, you can go into the sub-menus through the menu tree. When you connect the mobile app to the gimbal and your camera, you get access to a ton of really neat features. The mobile app also gives you complete control over the motion of the gimbal, so if you wanted to use your phone to do remote controls for panning and tilting, you can do that right from the mobile app. The mobile app also offers a mimic mode, which allows your gimbal and camera to mimic what your phone is doing. So when you turn on mimic mode, any motion you start to make with your mobile device, your camera and your gimbal will follow. In the end, if you can get past the plasticky build, the slightly overly complex menu system, and the potential issues I've found with the Inception mode barrel roll, then you will likely love this gimbal, and it definitely qualifies itself for its $399 price tag. And I think that's it. I think I've covered everything I was planning on covering in this video, but if I've forgotten anything, or if there's anything else you want to know about this gimbal, please let me know down in the comments down below. And if you liked this video and you found it helpful or mildly entertaining, go ahead and smash that like button, click subscribe for more videos just like this, and tap on that bell icon to get notified whenever I make new videos. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.